Hi, my name is Ruben, and I'm with Launch IT Solutions, and today we're going to talk about business class routers. Let me get started here. Alright, so we're going to discuss topics such as what does a router do, the difference between a home class router and a business class router, the security services that can be enacted or activated on a business class router, and then how to keep up and maintain your router and renew services and things that your current IT guy should be doing. Alright, so what does a router do? Well, first and foremost, it acts as a divider between the outside world and the inside world. If you see this little picture in the upper right hand corner here, it'll show the internet, there's a router, and then you have your internal devices. By default, that router acts as a shield or a firewall, right? To prevent anything from coming in. And you're like, well, why do I get viruses? The reason is because if you look at, let's say the outside world's here and the inside world's here, each time you browse the web, you're essentially pulling your arm out and pulling something in. When you hit send and receive, you're doing the same thing. You're pulling your arm out and you're bringing in email. You're pulling potentially malicious devices or viruses or malware into your corporation. So nothing can actively penetrate it unless there's some sort of an exploit with the router, and that does happen occasionally where they found a security hole, and which is why it's important to maintain your router. So some routers can stop malicious traffic. Routers can be used for port forwarding. What does that mean? If you have an internal mail server, back in the day it was really common for an organization to have a mail server inside their environment. So you would have to open little pinholes in your router to allow the traffic to come through. So that's not really such a big deal nowadays. With the 365 and G Suite, a lot of people are just hosting their email on the cloud. But there's definitely plenty of organizations that still host servers in their environment, and they have to open up pinholes or port forwarding to allow that traffic into their environment. So it also does device monitoring management. You can see what devices are in your environment, what IP addresses they have, what the name of the host names are, and then you can do things like deny access, or there's a lot of different ways of managing the infrastructure on your network. And obviously DHCP, the router serves as it hands out IP addresses to your devices as things get plugged into your network. For example, you can't call somebody if they've got the same phone number as you, right? So IP addresses are like phone numbers, and everybody needs a different IP address in order for them to communicate with one another. So the routers handle that process. It's called DHCP. All right, so business class routers versus home class routers. So business class routers, you can do secure remote connections. A lot of environments have, I've got many clients who need a remote in, especially during COVID. They need to be able to remote into to their work in a secure fashion. So business class routers typically offer some sort of a VPN functionality that lets you do that securely without opening a big hole on your network that will definitely invite some ransomware attacks. Security services, we'll discuss this in more detail on the next slide, so I'm just going to skim over that for now. Advanced data logging and reporting. So a lot of these routers, the business class routers, allow you to really super analyze traffic on your network. It's especially important if there's a degradation of service, or your ISP said, hey, somebody's sending out mass emails. With a really good router, you can do all kinds of reporting, all kinds of filtering to find out where that traffic's coming from, because it's going to be really difficult to find out otherwise, like where's all that traffic coming from that's malicious in your network. And with business class routers, they make that quite easy. You can also set up VLANs. A lot of organizations today have voice over IP phones, and they have obviously everything else, right? So they have printers and computers and everything else, but you want to prioritize that voice over IP traffic over everything else, because you want to make sure that call quality is good. And with VLANs, you can accomplish that. You can put VLANs are almost like virtual segmentations of your network. You could say, hey, you know what? All my phones are going to operate on VLAN 10, and all my computers and all the other devices are going to operate on VLAN 20. And therefore, when there's two devices trying to get out to the internet, always give preference to VLAN 10, which is your voice over IP phones, because that way, you're not waiting. The phone's not waiting for packets to go back and forth. It has preferential treatment. So VLANs are excellent for that, and those are only available with business class routers. Advanced networking, you can separate networks. There's different ways. I've got organizations where they've grown beyond, the point where, they've got, let's say they got 100 employees, maybe 125 employees. But you've got to understand that in addition to everybody just having a desktop, they might have a laptop, they might have a smartphone, they have a tablet, they have a watch. Now you've got 100 employees, but you've got 5 devices potentially on every single employee, and that's 5 IP addresses. Well, your typical C-class subnet will only have 254 addresses. So with advanced networking on these business class routers, you can set up, I want to separate the local physical devices from the wireless devices, and then you can just introduce an entire 256 block of addresses used specifically for wireless. And it really helps you kind of expand on your existing network. So home class routers basically just, they provide internet and Wi-Fi, secure Wi-Fi. They definitely do that. They do some simple port forwarding for sure. But that's pretty much about it, so you don't get any of the VPN services, any of the other VLANs that you can do with a business class router. All right, so let's talk about security services now. Security services are those things that really help protect your network. Now, we at Launch IT Solutions believe in a layered approach in security. So we actually start with, if you look at the outside coming in, we focus on spam filtering. So all of our customers have some sort of spam filtering in place. Then the next level is the router, because the router can then wash stuff that's coming into your environment as well. And then we talk about antivirus on the actual endpoint, and then we use something called Threat Locker, which is like a zero trust software on top of that. And then at the very, very end, we have encryption on the actual endpoint, the devices that are, under our compliance, our customers that have compliance needs, such as HIPAA or NIST or whatever. So that's kind of a 5-layered security approach. And having a router is a really important layer in that respect. So let's talk a bit about this. So these routers, you can turn on antivirus and malware scanning, meaning every single packet that comes in from the outside is being scanned not only at the spam level, at the virus level on your actual computer, but it's actually being scanned at the router level as well. So that just gives you another layer of sniffing those packets and that data as it's entering your network. Geo-blocking and filtering. There are the top 10 hacker countries in the world. Unfortunately, America's one of them, so it'd be difficult to block traffic from America, but at least you can do something about the other 9 countries if you're not doing business with those countries. China, Afghanistan, North Korea, Iran, I think there's a company, Brazil, it happens to be a pretty big one too. So we go through and basically do geo-blocking, meaning if there's any traffic originating from those countries at all, just block the traffic. Don't just drop it as if it doesn't exist. So geo-blocking is a really cool feature there. You could also introduce spam filtering at the router level. We use a third-party service, whether we use Barracuda or Spam Titan, but you could actually even turn it on at the router level as well. Let me see here. So access control. We have an organization that houses students. So instead of saying, I want to block certain categories of websites, pornography or whatever, you could say, I only want to whitelist certain websites. So basically everything's going to be blacklisted by default, except for maybe Primavera.com, maybe a certain other websites. So that you really, really start doing the reverse. Instead of like saying on black categories, you're saying I only want to give them access to these 10 websites and that's it. So you can do things like that with the business class router. That's pretty cool. Content filtering. Obviously just talking about, blocking specific categories of websites. For example, you probably don't want your employees job hunting while they're on the job. So you could block access to Indeed or, any other job hunting sites, just to prevent that from happening, where you're basically paying them to job hunt, and that's not cool. Also, you can also block social media, so they're not wasting time there. Any music streaming services, obviously pornography, things that you deem deem fit to not have your employees be doing on company time. You can block all that stuff. Also, VPN services. This allows you to basically create a secure connection into your environment. Or even have a secure, if you have multiple locations, you can do a site-to-site tunnel where all the data back and forth is encrypted between the two organizations or the two sites. And that may be important if, for example, you have a medical establishment where the server's at one site, but then the other site still needs to access that server. Using VPN services is a really good way of getting that accomplished. All right. Let's see what else we have here. All right, so what's important about keeping your router up to date? So one thing you might want to ask your current IT guy is we have a board that we use to manage all of our routers, our customer routers, and then we have a column that basically lists when the security services expire, and then we get a notification via email 1 month prior to expiring, so that we know we have to renew those security services for that customer site. So you can buy it, but then you just won't know when it expires unless you have something written down, unless your IT guy is actively checking on a monthly basis. So knowing that these services need to be renewed, somebody's actively on it, it's important to do that. Also, these backups on these guys, sometimes it's very difficult to program these guys, especially if you have a complex network. It may take an hour or two just to program the router to make sure you have every connection to every vendor, every VLAN, every DHCP pool, every exception, every rule. I mean, there's so many things you can program on these. So making sure that you have an active backup on your router is very important. The reason SonicWall's up there is we like SonicWalls, but there's a very good handful of routers out there that can be used. So obviously firmware updates. Firmware updates, I was talking about that earlier, is sometimes there are security holes or performance patches that are updated and released, and on a quarterly basis we try to go and update our customers' routers to make sure they're on the latest firmware, so that there are any exploits that get released that our customers aren't going to fall prey to somebody trying to exploit those exploits. So anyways, those are the security holes. So that's pretty important. All right, so what's the call to action here? The first thing would be to find out what kind of router you have in your current environment. In a business environment, I always recommend getting a business class router, not a home class router. If you're not really sure, it might even be as simple as a 5-minute or 10-minute remote session call. We remote in, and we can help you find out and determine what kind of router you have in place. Or if you're looking to implement your very first router or open your first business, we can help you procure that router and help you program it and get it set up and make sure that you're safe in that respect. But besides routers, we do all kinds of stuff. We're a managed service provider, so we offer we resell hardware, we secure your network, we back up your data, and we support your team. So if you have any needs in that, so we operate out of the Phoenix major metro area, and you can just give us a call. You can always reach us at info@launchits.com, or just give us a call at 480-999-5468. I hope this helped and helped you better understand routers. Take care.